Welcome to commas. Take a look at this screen. A comma indicates a pause. It can separate something or it can connect two sentences. So, rule number 1, use a comma after an opener. That means it could be a transition word, an introductory word, or a whole phrase or clause. An opening word would be something like furthermore, comma. An opening phrase, broken and bruised, comma. And here's an opening dependent clause, because she had a sore throat, comma. Now, typically the rule is for a dependent clause and frequently for a phrase, but not always, it needs to be 4 or more words. So that's an example of a dependent clause with 4 or more words to open your sentence. Rule number 2, use a comma to set off an interrupter. So we have talked about this with our Unit 3 last quarter. If you have a non-essential relative pronoun clause, you put commas around it. That means it starts with who, whom, whose, which, and the sentence reads okay without the interrupting relative pronoun clause. But here are some examples of other types of interrupters that don't have to be relative pronoun clauses. So these are just phrases. F. Scott Fitzgerald, in fact, is named after Francis Scott Key. So you can hear the little pause. I could take this part out, in fact, and I could read F. Scott Fitzgerald is named after Francis Scott Key, and it would be okay on its own. That's how I know to put commas around that just extra pause or extra bit of information. Rule 3, use a comma to set off a closer. So that has to be a closing phrase, a fragment. And an example is Kayla dribbled up court, comma, her sparkling new Nikes squeaking with each move she made. So you can see here, this is not a complete sentence, that's a phrase. So we would use a comma there. Use commas to separate items in a series. So getting on Google Classroom, comma, doing all my assignments, comma, and behaving well are all things I can do to ensure my success in school. And this comma is called an Oxford comma. Brain tip. MLA style says we need that comma before the and. So always items in a series, you put a comma with them, including that one before the and. Rule number 5, use a comma and one of the fanboys to make a compound sentence. We've talked about this one a lot. Only put a comma before a fanboy if there's a complete sentence after it. So Tyler will run outside for 20 minutes, comma, or he will do a 30-minute cardio workout in his living room, has 2 sentences put together. Rule 6, use a comma to introduce a quotation when used with explanatory words like he said, she exclaimed. So that can come at the beginning of the quote or in the middle. As Post Malone sang, we couldn't turn around, comma, sang Post Malone, comma, till we were upside down. So there you have his lyric, and in the middle interrupted by narration. So it's kind of like an interrupter again, but that's how you do the commas there. If you're going to start with the narration of who's saying it, do the comma after the verb. Rule 7, use a comma in dates and addresses. You're very familiar with this one, probably knowing to put the comma between the day and the year, but sometimes we forget this one. If you're going to continue your sentence, you have to have a comma there between the date and the continuation. That's a true fact about my sophomore in high school brother. And then here's one of my old childhood addresses. So with an address, it's street name, comma, city, comma, state, and if you're continuing with your sentence, you do another comma to separate the address from the sentence. Now you are going to apply these comma rules with a practice page I am attaching in addition to this video explanation. All right, have a great day.